Local programming on KRWG Public Media made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
This is KRWG Public Media, TV, radio, online, news that matters. Now, across the Mesilla Valley and the borderland, the stories that shape our community. From the KRWG Broadcast Center at New Mexico State University, this is Newsmakers.
Hello and welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Anthony Moreno. On the program today, we talk with author, film director, and regenerative hemp farmer Doug Fine, who has a new film out shining light on hemp and how it may play a role in sustainable living. The film is called American Hemp Farmer. Let's take a look.
I fled Babylon 20 years ago. I guess you could say I saw the writing on the wall, growing up as I did in suburbia when Madonna was like a virgin. Homeschool the kids, snuggle a sweetheart, grow some food.
All our goats are named after singers whose voices sound goat, like Taylor Swift, Spice. Come here, Bjork.
Growing wildfire in New Mexico's Gila National Forest is now confirmed to be the largest in state history.
Just got real. This is the first time we've had to plant hemp as though our family's survival depended on it.
And then we create a CBD flower infused hemp oil.
Feels good to help people, that's for sure.
This little seed in our hands, is it an exaggeration to say we're talking about a ninth inning recovery for humanity?
That's for damn sure.
One plant's long fiber.
Whoa! So are we lost? You guys know that?
I think we are. I think we are.
It's like 30 degrees cooler when you take a few steps under the canopy.
So it's actually absorbing all that CO2 out of the air right now as we speak.
Figuring out survival is a fun puzzle. And you know, if our supply chains go solar, everything is plentiful, and world peace breaks out, we spend a lot of time outside playing together with goats.
Well, you heard the man. If you do not have to be out on these roads, please stay at home.
Yesterday was a wild ride. We were pulling the last plants in the snow out there.
It never ends.
No rest. Not for the farmer.
Why do we look so happy? I can't figure it out.
It's just beautiful to be outside and alive today.
This is a story of families just like yours, on a quest for personal food security, even as they create markets for their healthy harvests. These are American hemp farmers.
The film is called American Hemp Farmer. Please welcome the director of the film, Doug Fine. Doug, thanks for joining us.
Such a pleasure to be here with you, Anthony.
I'd like to hear about the inspiration behind this film.
Well, thanks for asking. And first of all, it's real life here on the Funky Butte Ranch in New Mexico. The goats are fed, the chickens are laying with the coming of spring. So it's a documentary about food security while mitigating extreme climate. Follows 3 families for an entire growing season, and it's a labor of love over many years. The inspiration came when the big Black Range fire in 2013, we were a day or two away from being climate refugees, like so many New Mexicans. And it opened our eyes that the climate Pearl Harbor had happened. We had to live our lives being part of the climate solution.
I see. Now, with this film, what are viewers going to be able to discover about sustainable living and the possibilities of it?
Well, first of all, if I can do it, anybody can. There's a lot of no experience necessary and my unavoidable clumsiness in it. It's small steps that everybody can take, and the key is building soil. We're all soil farmers now, really, is one of the mantras, and we all have busy digital age lives. But many of us are thinking about things like extreme climate, supply chain integrity, certainly not rooting for any of this great, wonderful life we have with, streaming and other digital age amenities. I love it. But one of the messages is you can turn it regenerative, and you can help be more in control of your family's food security should the magic supermarkets go away.
Well, during the pandemic, we obviously paid a lot of attention to food security. Food insecurity is a major problem for many families in New Mexico. So I'd like to hear from you. Why do you think hemp can play a role in helping address food security?
That's a great question, and I think there are a number of ways. First and foremost, just looking at the numbers of the nutrition that hemp provides. Hemp is a bona fide superfood, 30+% protein in the hemp seeds, which is the application that I love growing for most, although there are several. And so we kind of did the math. We're trying to step up our food security in our own family, and the film documents that, and we're just taking baby steps. So for instance, there's 3 tablespoons of hemp in one serving. We harvest just from our plants here in the state, call it about 30 pounds of seed that we're not using for other things like replanting or seed development and research, that kind of thing. So we have 30 pounds of the superfood, and it translates into 1 meal for every member of my family every 3 days. So that, along with our goats and their milk and whatnot, chicken eggs, baby steps towards food security. Besides the high protein, hemp is also really high in a couple of interesting minerals that aren't super common in non-meat foods, such as selenium and magnesium. And a really other cool property of hemp seed nutritively is it is high in gamma-linoleic acid, which is associated with anti-inflammatory properties nutritively. So you really are getting a true superfood with hemp, with the side effect being it's what's known as a phytoremediative plant. Its roots build soil and sequester carbon. So at the same time you're feeding your family, you're also playing a role in future generations having a habitable planet. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say having a lot of fun along the way. Being outside with your family in a hemp field getting dive bombed by pollinators is a good time, Anthony.
Yeah, you mentioned having fun. You've been quoted as saying being a regenerative farmer or supporting them in your community is the most fun you can have outside the bedroom. Tell us more about just how much fun you're having.
I don't think it's a stretch to say that after growing up in the suburbs, having stumbled upon this lifestyle where there's true quiet, and almost everybody in New Mexico can relate to this, where you can hear in the morning a hummingbird's wings outside your window. I think to a degree, such sanity as I have resides in that quiet. You can hear yourself think. You can allow your family to be your priority. You can be aware of the phase of the moon. Even if, as you go about a busy digital age workday, I really honestly, like so many New Mexicans, give a thanks for this every day. And it's not just me. People like George Washington documented how much happier they felt after the stresses of war when they were able to get back on the farm. So this is kind of long-standing, and it's therapy too for U.S. soldiers coming home, with PTSD or other issues from wartime. Many are finding their sanity again in rural settings.
Can you tell us a little bit about what your life was like when you were a so-called suburbanite, living that life, and then finally, was there something that you felt made you make the decision to move on to live off the grid?
I grew up in the New York suburbs when Madonna was like a virgin. And I suppose I should credit family vacations to national parks to some degree, where I was first able to experience that quiet. With regard to the Land of Enchantment specifically, coming to New Mexico, like so many people now 18 years ago, completely falling in love with New Mexico. It felt like home right away. When my wife and I fell in love, we knew we wanted to have this homeschooling lifestyle. People will often ask me, "Oh, how did you get so lucky to find someone that would agree to this?" She was already of the same mindset when we met, and so she makes a lot of our clothes, and it's unbelievable the day-to-day healing that happens when you're 40 minutes from town, when the dog has got something that you might otherwise take it to the vet, or a goat has an issue. I'm so proud of my kids, bringing a chicken in from the chicken coop. I walk into my kitchen and my chicken's having a foot bath because of an injured toe. So these are the kind of things I'm proud of, the way some parents are when their kids get into law school.
I see. How sustainable and off the grid are you living right now?
It varies. I think a lot of people who are trying to live this neo-rugged individualist lifestyle might relate. What happens is you get so deep into it, and you have your goats, let's say, who have to be milked twice a day. And I should say, in the fun category, all our goats are named after singers that we like, but whose voices are somewhat goat-like. So you'll frequently hear us calling to Natalie Merchant or Bjork or Taylor Swift. So you're milking goats twice a day. My company is called The Goats Are in Charge. We work for goats, and we don't complain about it, because you're out there on a date with your wife trimming goat hoofs. You feel like a billionaire. It's a good life, but you can't get anywhere, right? We have to jump through a lot of hoops just to get our chickens watched, so we can make it to this film premiere for American Hemp Farmer in Santa Fe. So you begin to work hard for these animals, and you want breaks. And so I'd say sometimes it's 2 steps forward, 1 back. As my kids get older, they're taking over more and more chores, which makes us be able to broaden. But having said that, only with a lot of help from our friends and a lot of barter would we be fully independent if supply chains went away. But we try to take baby steps forward every year.
How challenging is it to work to be so sustainable and live off the land in a time when we're dealing with many different issues with climate change?
The hardest part is being careful in your purchases, and this is like something that I think anybody can process in their own family budget and in their own lives. It's a decision whether or not you want to, let's say, get a food item, whether you want to grow it yourself, which is ideal, or if you can't grow, carrots this season and you want carrot, go to a farmer's market or a food co-op. I'm a big fan of food co-ops because that's where my wife and I met. And that you're actually making a decision to grow from a place where the farmers are getting a significant amount of food. The food is more nutrient dense, likely because it's coming locally or regionally. And those kind of decisions are the most challenging when you could go to a publicly traded outside corporation and buy carrots for a lot cheaper sometimes. So, it's pay the grocer now or the doctor later, or whatever the saying might be. As for the actual day-to-day lifestyle, it's a learning curve. For folks familiar with Inspector Clouseau, I am super clumsy. I have a good rapport with animals and increasingly with plants, as I recognize plant intelligence. But again, if I can do this, anybody can. The unfun parts for me is things like wiring solar panels. But for me, when we are so excited for like a week in advance of a goat kidding, we can't believe there's going to be these new baby goats. And sometimes my wife is knitting little sweaters for them if it's the cold time of year. So that part of it, it's like it's like Little House on the Prairie without the cultural insensitivity. Like we love, I would say, everyone in my family loves that side of it, and we know that there's a real payoff too in the climate side of it. That's a thing that drives us as well. One thing I'm proud of is New Mexico State University did a study a couple of years ago with hemp variety that I had developed, and found that it was effective in phase 1. There needs to be further research. Effective in cleaning damaged mining soil that came from the Four Corners region. I think now Hannah Rios, her name, the researcher who is now a PhD at New Mexico State, asked me for our seed, and probably most of any hemp seed would work for phytoremediation. Sort of a paper trail now with this variety. So we're out there planting, acutely thinking we're building soil as well as growing our family food.
Well, that sounds really interesting. I mean, just from what we know of this study so far, you think that this hemp seed could possibly help the soil where there has been mining going on?
Yes, and so with each type of what one might call stressed soil, different tests have to be done. And there have been tests showing that hemp is a very strong phytoremediative or soil building plant with things like hydrocarbons, in other words, petroleum remnants. And the study that my seed was part of, the New Mexico State University study, was testing cleaning radioactivity from where uranium mines are built. So that's one. Another type, it would be great to see more research on forever chemicals. But even where soil is not acutely polluted, what's happening when you plant hemp is it's an annual. So you're planting it every year. And unusually for an annual, its tap roots are very, very long, which aerates soil. And that physical aeration allows a home for the type of healthy microbial village, you might say, that is doing the job of allowing the plant to sequester the carbon from the atmosphere. And this is kind of documented, not just in hemp, but in other plants, that there's significant carbon sequestration going from agriculture. In fact, the film talks a little bit about how regenerative agriculture might be the quantifiably number one way mitigate extreme carbon situations and hopefully have a habitable planet for great-grandchildren.
Well, as we continue the conversation about how to have a sustainable living and deal with climate change as well, here in New Mexico, a major concern is water. How does that play a role and affect your decisions when growing hemp?
It affects every decision in life. It's funny, when I travel for work outside of the state and hear folks complaining because it's raining again or snowing again, I say, oh my gosh, packages and ship it back to the land of enchantment. We'll take every single drop. And that's true for so many places. So first I'll say that hemp is a very water efficient crop. One of the storylines in the American Hemp Farmer film surrounds a newlywed couple with whom I've been friends for years, asking me to help them cultivate certified organic hemp in Vermont. So we have this New Mexico storyline, a Vermont storyline, and also a Oregon storyline with a few other cool stories in there. But in the Vermont story, we never have to water. Vermont's so wet, hemp doesn't require any supplemental water. Here in New Mexico, it really depends. As we know, our monsoon seasons have been a little iffy. It really depends on if we're getting what we need. And if we are, I wind up not even having drip for much of the year. A daily thunderstorm is enough for hemp. And what's more, I've discovered some lessons in polyculture, plants that grow well with hemp. Hemp grows with this beautiful umbrella canopy and means that we need less water for our other food crops. Let's say tomatoes, beans, the Three Sisters here in New Mexico, those type of crops. I also wanted to say that we in New Mexico have one of the most farmer-friendly hemp programs in the nation. I'd like to see hemp growing be as easy administratively as growing tomatoes or other crops, but to the extent that for federal reasons it's not, our program has been one of the top in the nation since it started.
I say it's very interesting. I want to talk more about your teaching. You said you teach newlywed couples about how to be a farmer in the digital age. Can you tell us exactly about what a digital age farmer looks like today?
Another great question, because the truth is, for farmers for a long time, let's say for much of the 20th century, your farm year was long and hard, but when it was over, it was over. The phrase mending harness. Now, farmers have to be entrepreneurs too, unless they have massive acreage and are selling wholesale, in which case they're more at the whims of wholesale markets and wholesale buyers. So, for instance, my Vermont friends who are covered in the film, and also many people who have taken my online hemp course are in this category, they grow on relatively small acreage. They're called Vermont pharmacy, like pharmacy spelled like a farm rather than pharma, F-A-R-M. They grow certified organic. They process it together. We filmed all this. They bottle it, and then they pound the pavement. They market it online. They market it at food co-ops and other healthy platforms around Vermont. And this is the life of the digital age farmer. And so one of the appeals made in the film, the action plan for people who are not themselves farmers, is please support entities like this. You're going to be getting more nutritive food, more bioavailable food, whether it's hemp or another product, while sequestering carbon and supporting an actual family farmer getting more than the 3 cents of the farm dollar that farmers normally get for most crops today. So the challenge point is, am I going to go and look at that farmer's market and buy the local New Mexico, Vermont, whatever, buy their farm products? Or am I going to take the easy way out, go to a box store and get something that, on paper, the label says it's the same, but is not as win-win as it is to support a local farmer?
The practices that you're talking about, it seems like it's also about knowing all the hands that feed you in some way. Is this a way of us just really looking back to maybe how generations before us lived and grew crops?
Well, I think one proof of just how absolutely spot on correct that assessment is comes in a really special scene in this film where we visit the first hemp harvest at George Washington's Mount Vernon estate since 1799. I was very lucky that the longtime manager at Mount Vernon had read some of my books about hemp, and not knowing we were making a film about it, invited us there, and we got into colonial clothes and harvested with very sharp sickles. And the message, Anthony, was exactly what you're saying, which is what's old is what's new. George Washington was a serious farmer, and he was very serious about hemp. He was a huge fan of hemp, and little known fact, one of the markets for his hemp, what he used it for, was he grew it for fiber, which is not the seed that we talked about as a nutrient superfood, not the roots that we talked about for phytoremediation, not the flower that's really popular today for health cannabinoids like CBD, that many people have heard of, but the fiber, the actual stalks of the plant. He used those to make fishing nets. And some years he made a significant majority of his income selling fish that he caught with hemp fiber ropes.
Interesting. Now, moving on to just how this affects the wellness of your family, can you share a little bit about that?
So far, we're very blessed with good health, and the food security movement, you might say, and for many people in rural America, is tied into homeschooling, which we do as well. Kind of an effort to be community-based, family-based, and self-sufficient as much as possible, just in case. Like we've discussed, it's the most fun you can have along the way. So that preface was just to say that because I feel so blessed to have this lifestyle with a loving and healthy family, I can't leap to the conclusion that it's because we eat a lot of hemp. But I think it sure doesn't hurt. It's, as they used to say in the commercials, part of a balanced diet. And most of all, maybe in the end, the healthiest thing is being outside with people that love, as I described earlier, getting surrounded by hummingbirds, hearing woodpeckers bonking. And one of the big things is pollinators. When you stop for a minute in that quiet and you hear this bee drone symphony is the loudest sound that you're hearing, besides the fact that it's meditative and lovely and happy, pollinators are really key to human survival. Many people will know this, but if you're new to the discussion, it's worth doing a little research. How important are pollinators to the food system worldwide? And the answer is very. And as we document in the film, bees love hemp, especially male pollen. And the research is early into what's going on. Why do the pollinators love hemp so much? And one of it is they up their corbiculae, the side of their legs there with hemp pollen, and they fly it back to the hive, and they feed some of it to the queen, evidently. So you have your nutritive use, and then they bolster strength of some of the tunnels and passageways in the hive with the hemp, which is humans use for natural building called hempcrete. The bees are using hemp evidently for more than one application.
I see. I mean, what you're really shining light on is a farm-to-table practice that seems to be growing in momentum for many folks across the country as they have escaped cities and look to more off-the-grid style living or living in rural communities. Do you see this kind of catching on in the future, and what are your hopes with this film?
Thanks for that. I do think that it is a growing movement, and I think anybody can play a role. For instance, let's say you live in an urban situation. If you can get your porch growing some native soil, your rooftop, you're doing something. And certainly suburban lawns can be turned into a fun polyculture thing. But in terms of folks really seriously thinking about that farm to shelf mentality, both in their shopping, but also, living the lifestyle and growing it, it feels like it's a huge momentum. And I think that that's a great thing. Having said all that, I always have to take a step back and say, I'm always surprised when, for instance, I'll meet folks who care about local economies, couldn't be more concerned about their family and their community, but haven't yet made the leap that maybe spending that extra amount at a farmer's market or a food co-op is worth it versus, let's say, a box store. So we all take our educational steps at our own pace. And one statistic that really brings it home was a few years ago, a Canadian hemp company did a fully North American study and found that less than 1% of homes have ever had a hemp product in there. So to potential hemp farmers, I say there's a potential growing market for your superfood product.
Okay, well, unfortunately, we're out of time. The new film is American Hemp Farmer, directed by Doug Fine. Doug, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me, Anthony.
That's it for this week's program. Remember, you can always keep updated with the latest news anytime at krwg.org. For all of us at KRWG Public Media, I'm Anthony Moreno. We'll see you next time on Newsmakers.